Welcome back to the Cinnamon Effect. I'm Kimberly Hand, and today I have Alexia McLeod, CEO and founder of Therapeutic Center for Hope, is an adoption specialist and a sought-after relationship expert. Today, you'll be able to experience a sense of her motto, Reclaim Your Future, which is embodied in her company. By reclaiming your future, Alexia focuses on bringing the best out of you and nurturing you to reach your destiny. Having practiced relationship therapy for 25 years, Alexia takes pride in helping others identify what they want in a relationship and how to obtain those healthy relationships within themselves and others by setting boundaries. With her passion and talents, she has become a leader in her field, specializing in relationships, adoption, women's issues, parenting, and boundary setting. She has been the keynote speaker for Super Soul Empowerment Brunch, Christ Fellowship, Tenet Healthcare, and the Florida Adoption Council, to name a few, and is more than excited to speak to you all on the effects of social media has on your mental health that you may not even know is there. Being a trailblazer, advocating for women's empowerment, and assisting people to break down the emotional barriers that have been holding them back from achieving their true potential, bringing the best out of you and nurturing you to reach your destiny is the gift Alexia is here to give today. Alexia McLeod, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
We got connected through Dr. Gandhi. I feel like I'm always referring back to Dr. Gandhi, but she connected us. We love her. She's the best. So when we spoke, gosh, you have such an amazing background and skill set with what you do with relationships. And we talked about your personal story of divorce and how that kind of shaped you, right? And your expertise in the field of adoption. So I want to dive into all this stuff. Yeah. How did you get started in working with parents wanting to adopt children?
Well, you know what? It was, I'm telling you, I always say it's like a God thing because I was actually going through a divorce at the time, and I'd moved back to South Florida, and I found myself working at an adoption-friendly hospital. And the only thing I knew at that time about adoption was that there was these amazing people that wanted to adopt, which is absolutely true. But then I really learned about the power of a birth mother as well, too, and the different stages and phases and things that people don't really think about. And I fell in love with adoption, the whole gamut from start to finish of having people not just, have their dreams come through parenting or really restore their life through gifting a baby, but really looking at the different psychological phases that you go through and making sure that we educate so that it's the best decision for all parties.
Yeah. How does that, tell me about like the process, and you're dealing directly with the person that is giving their baby for adoption.
So I deal with all different aspects. So whenever we do adoption, the state of every state is different. So the state of Florida has different state laws than everyone else when it's regarded to adoption. So when I deal with adoption, there's times when I might deal with the adoptive parent and doing home studies and really educating, preparing them and doing the therapy that goes along with it until the time that they get a child placed in their hands. And there's other times that I deal with the birth mother. So the birth mother that may call me or call an adoption agency or an attorney and say, I really am thinking about doing adoption. So it's really a consideration until the time that they place. It is a consideration, but what we do is I prepare them during that time and educating and giving counseling and making sure that mentally that they're in a place where they can do it. So it's, my purpose is to help people to make the right choice. And adoption is amazing choice. People, I always say it's a third choice that people don't talk about, right? So it is an amazing choice that people can have to really get their life back on track and know that they gave their children the gift of having parents and parenting that they were unable to give them at that time. So that is that's my whole goal, is to make it a positive process for all parties.
Yeah. Now, was anyone close to you adopted? Did you have some kind of knowledge of adoption before you got into that space?
Believe it or not, I really didn't know much about people. For many years, people didn't really talk about adoption. Even when they were adopted, they didn't. It was like that little secret that you kept. And I call that like the adoption of yesteryear. So the adoption, the new age adoption, or adoption since I've been doing it, which is a long time, has been to, you know what, it's not a secret. This is an amazing thing that you have, like I call it a tummy mom that gifted you. And you have this amazing, adoptive parents that are your parents that are raising you. And there's no secret in that. So, for me, once I started to get into adoption and really, I'm telling you, it's like my whole phase of life has been like, when they say things are intended, my older daughter is actually, she's my biological daughter, but my husband now has adopted her when she was 6, I believe it was, is when she asked if she could have his last name and adopted. So there is like so many different forms of adoption that people don't recognize, even step parent adoption, to where that can happen and you solidify your family through that.
Yeah. Now, do you work with people? I can imagine, at some point, maybe the adoptive parent wants to tell the child that they've been adopted, right? Do you sometimes work with those families at that phase of it? Yeah, I bet.
Yeah. You're asking such good questions. You know what I mean? It is, because these are things that people don't usually, they usually don't bring up, but things that I bring up, even in the point of adoption, if I'm working with a family that's choosing to adopt, is, how are you going to disclose it, and prepping them. And there's times that people like later on will come to me and say, how we never really talked about it so much. So how can I bring it up? So doing that counseling, so it's not a traumatic event, and really encouraging people when I work with them in the beginning to not keep it a secret, I go so far as to, if I'm working with birth moms or the adoptive parents, to really encourage, we call it match meetings, to where they might even have a Skype call like this, or they might be face to face. They don't know their last names, but they they meet. And they get to ask questions that they may ask later, like, are you allergic to anything? Or what's your favorite food? Or are you into sports? So that they can see the little biological things that come along. And finding that bond when they have these match meetings is amazing, because it lets the birth mother know that, guess what, I chose right. Because it's not just a one-sided thing to where someone comes in and says, I want that one. It's the birth mother too that says, you know what, I think she's looking at profiles and saying, I think these two people, just based on their life and how they live their life and the things that I've been told, these are going to be the right people to parent my baby.
Wow.
So it makes, it's such like a powerful thing. And it makes them, like, when you see at the end, it makes it so much better when they hand this baby over. Then it's like they hand it with like love and care, knowing that they made the right decision.
Yeah, that's so powerful. And do you feel like, first of all, do you think there's a good age to, I know you're saying, don't keep it a secret, but do you think there is like a good age, or you say just right off the bat, you start to introduce, just start to introduce that?
And I say, right off the bat, to where, you might even have a picture. You might even, and this goes way far into things that I do. So any of you out there that are doing adoption counseling, you might want to take some notes, right?
Yeah.
It's I go as far as to like encourage my birth mothers to make a book and make like a gift box that has pictures or has like a little note or something like that in them. Because what that does is later on, your child is going to have questions, right? They know that they weren't given away. You'll always hear me say gifted. They were gifted, right? So it's so you have these things that are right there. I had a couple of different clients that literally, when the birth mother, they had them do maternity pictures all together. So your kid at some point is going to say, what's that? And it's okay to say that's your tummy mom. So this is not a weird thing. It's not, you'd be surprised at how many people are, if they're not adopted, then they know someone that's adopted, or they they're talking to somebody about, they've considered certain things, or they know someone that has been adopted before. So it's about taking the passe, conversation out of it and letting them know that it's okay. I always give the joke. I said, I had to get what I got, but you got to choose. You got chosen.
Yeah.
So it's, so it is, I think that is like a positive part.
I love that. I have a close friend who found her birth parents later in life, as an adult, did like a 23andMe and then found, this connection and, really well, actually, at this later point. And then I actually have a family member who is in the process of adopting a baby or a child. I'm not really sure, what the age will be, but she's in this process too. So this is very interesting to me. And I actually didn't realize that the birth mother has access to seeing who the potential parents will be.
They do. So before they're, when you, let's say is it your friend or your cousin or
yeah, she's a cousin by marriage. So yeah.
Oh. So your cousin by marriage, when she's adopted, literally she makes what you call a profile book with her adoption agency or an attorney, which has like pictures and it tells a lot of things about her. And when whoever's facilitating that adoption, they will show the potential birth mothers these profile books and say, let's look at a couple profile books and let's see who you feel. So they're making the initial choice. So the adoptive parents are chosen by the birth mother.
Wow.
In cases like that, which is really, it's neat. And the whole purpose is to really empower the birth mother to let them know that, guess what, this is your choice. Yeah, this is absolutely your choice, and saying, you're not able to do it right now, whether it's financial, social, whatever else is going on in your life, but you still have a choice and you're not being left out of the process. So I think it's an amazing thing to know that you are chosen.
Yes. No, I love that. I love the gifted, you've been gifted and just putting a positive, you're so positive. I can see the light radiating from you. So I love that you facilitate this for people. Such an important decision on both parts, right? To undertake that. So, so I love that. I also want to talk about, a slightly less, sweet conversation of divorce, right?
I knew we were going there. See, I'm telling you, go from one extreme to the next.
You know what? You got to do it. You got to do it.
And see, well, divorce is like a topic that this is one of my biggest specialties. And I think people were always like, divorce. I never heard that people, because I've been doing this for a long time, specializing in the field of divorce. And I feel as though people don't focus in on that enough. They're thinking about, okay, relationship, but what happens if you're smart enough to know that your relationship is it's not going to work out, because it takes two people for it to work. So you make the powerful decision. How do you get past that? So for me, it's so important for people to recognize the stages and phases that you go through during divorce. That is normal. Even prepping, I have seen clients, two couples sitting in one room that we call a pre-divorce counseling. Isn't that crazy? Because they know this. So how can you divorce amicably? How can you make sure that and if that can't happen and you're coming in to get through your divorce, how can you make sure that you're not carrying the same baggage and bondage that you had in here, so you make better decisions the next time? So I think that's an important aspect to look at for so many people.
Yeah. I guess maybe we should backtrack, because you also do premarital counseling as well, right? And after our conversation, I was kind of thinking about this, because I was so young when I started dating my now husband. And I'm like, wow, I didn't do premarital counseling, and I didn't really ask a lot of important questions that I see now are important things that maybe we should have talked out a little bit before we got married. So where do you start, and hopefully it doesn't end in divorce? Yeah.
So, for me, you said it, there's a lot of questions that when we're in the whole phase of dating and engagement, and it's like, we're in such a, we're on a high, that we don't even think about things that maybe to come, like we got bills, finances, we got, do you want kids? Are we going to have kids? A lot of times what we do is we're dealing with things based on our own cognition of what we think is going to happen, and really not looking at, okay, if two is joining as one, what is going to be the best decision for us as a couple? How do we communicate when everybody's going to fight? I'm sorry, people, but listen, we all have arguments, but we want to be able to resolve them. So what are the best ways to resolve an argument? What is the best way to communicate if you have an issue with your spouse or your partner? How can we do that? So looking at how to fight fair, and communicate effectively. And, really important things like how are finances actually going to work in our home? What is your ideal? Are you going to work? What are your expectations? These are important things to address even before you get married. Do you have debt? People don't ask that. I'm like, listen, you need to know, do they have debt?
Yeah, that's a big one.
And even, as far as when dealing with families, looking at, how are our families going to interact? How is your relationship with your family? We have to step a second out of our utopia mentality, and romanticism of what we want for things to be, and look at, okay, here is this person's family. Do I get along with their family? How is this going to work? I don't want to, how are you going to help me facilitate things, and how am I going to help you? So having that conversation, I think it's not just important, it's necessary.
Yes. Yeah. How are your families going to intertwine? Do you think that people just aren't, what's leading to divorce these days? People just aren't taking the time, like our courtships shorter? What's happening there? Is the breakdown in the beginning, or?
I think, it's a lot of times I always say you're dating potential and you're not dating the person. So we have to get very real about what we see in a person and what we're looking for, because sometimes we're in a place in our life that we're more open to having a longer lasting relationship. But with who? Are you just choosing a person because they chose you? Because if you're amazing, then everybody's going to choose you, but you got to choose right. So we have to take a little responsibility in that as well, too. One of the huge things is to say, people don't really know what they want. We can say, okay, what is your ideal person? Oh, I want somebody that's ABC. Really? Are those your top 5? Are those the top things that are going to be important to you? Do you want somebody that I'll go to the hard ones. Do you want somebody that financially can match you or excel? Mm-hmm. Do you want somebody that is going to be a good parent? Do you want somebody that gets along with your family? Do you want a partier? What is, and sex? Mm-hmm. So we have to be able to, ask these questions, and also ask, what do I have to offer a person that is going to be so amazing? Mm-hmm. So, if we get to the point where we're like, okay, well, here's my ideals, what about you? What are your top qualities that you truly believe that you can offer a person? Are you going to be willing to kind of compromise some things, because they're going to have to compromise as well, too. So
do you suggest, I've heard all kinds of things, like people writing down these expectations of, like doing a contract, so to speak, or what? How do you recommend kind of solidifying, this is what we're committing to, right?
Well, you know what? And it's funny that you say contract. I have people write down literally, and I say, make your list as long as you want it to, the initial list of, here are the things that I feel as though I want in a relationship. And then we break it down to your top 5. I've had, and it's so weird. I have a client that I saw probably 10 years ago. It's so funny. She's married now, but I had her do this. And then I was like, now you take that top 5, I want you to stick it in your purse. Not stick it in your wallet, not in your purse, because we change purses, right?
Yeah.
I want you to stick it in there and take it with you. And I said, when you go on these dates, afterwards, maybe even during, you go in the bathroom and say, does he seem to have these top 5? And if not, we don't need to waste time.
Yeah.
And many times what we do is we'll say, you know what, but he's this, or but she's this, or if people have a propensity that if your last boyfriend was cheap and this one seems to take you to all these nice places and trips, you're like, oh my God, but he's so awesome. He's so great, because our mentality is it didn't work out because of this. Now we find this, but you didn't realize this fool is in debt. And he is like spending his credit cards and soon to be yours and doing all of these things. So we're not looking at the nitty gritty of here's all the things, and getting to know a person, not just based on what's on surface, but who are they really? And does it really mesh with the things that I want in my life?
Now, you could still probably do all this work, write it all out, and it still could not work, right? I mean,
100%. You know, it's all about giving yourself the benefit of the doubt, and giving yourself a higher propensity to be able to attain what you want. But remember, a relationship takes 2, and people change. And that's why it's so important that when you're in a relationship, that you do check-ins with each other to see how are things changing. I know you and your husband have been together for a long time, my husband and I as well too. And things have changed. Our needs have changed. Our communication even has changed. So it's so important to be able to check in and see, what can I do better now for you? And being able to, do that as well on the other side.
And you talked about a 2-time a year relationship review. And I love this idea. So can you talk about that?
So, I really do think, when we're in a job, we do a 6-month check-in and a 6-month review. It's important that, at least every 6 months to really check in with your partner and say, how do you think that everything is going? How do you think that I can do better? And focusing in on yourself. How do you think that I can do better in things? Do you think that I met you last year or last 6 months? We talked about, even dealing with the children, how we were going to parent. How do you think that that's going? Because as your kid, listen, dynamics in the life change. When you mention kids and everything else, do you feel as though I've improved, or what can I do better? And allowing them to give you their honest answer, taking it in without defense.
Mm-hmm. That's the key.
That is the key, because what we have to do is to open up the door for constructive criticism. And if they may say, listen, you were on top of the world, 5. That's what your score is, 5 out of 5, right? Yeah. You did great. But the reality is that we always want to be able to step up our game. In work, we want to step up our game. In our relationship, you definitely want to step up our game, to make sure that you are being what your partner needs, and they feel as though they need to be what you need as well, too.
Now I feel like that review, I'm only speaking from experience because 20 years in a relationship, but I feel like that could open a can of worms. Like, oh, I didn't know you were feeling that way, or, you should have told me this sooner, or, I don't know. How are you setting your boundaries from that point? And maybe it's about setting boundaries, right?
It's about setting boundaries and not waiting until a 6-month review in order to until you tell somebody that something bothered you. You're not writing it down and putting it on a thing and saying, I'm going to store this up.
Yeah.
It's saying that I can really see that over this, I address this with you, and, I can see that you're actually really working on it, and it means something to me. I think that in relationships, what is unfortunate, and I think that contributes to people, to divorce and to separation and people not trying as hard. Once we become close with someone, we stop being as vulnerable. We don't feel as comfortable to tell them what's on our heart and what's on our mind when something bothers. And a lot of it is trying to avoid conflict, but then the conflict lies within. And what happens is when we repress conflict, then it comes out in another way. Trust me, it is not that repressed. It's coming out in the way you communicate with them, the way you talk to them, the way when they come to give you a hug that you're like, you know what I mean? It comes out.
Yeah.
So it feels as though if we could say things, but in a way that our partner could receive it, it would really ameliorate a lot of these different conflicts.
Yes. Just get it out. So don't let it fester. Just kind of address it right there.
Yeah. And then we have to learn how to address it. For some people, they need to say it right now, right? For other people, they want to process your statement before, if I go to my husband and I say, he's like, let's talk about this afternoon type of guy. Right. And I'm like, don't tell me that I'm not, don't let me sit in it. If you have something, then let's say it now. But what I've come to realize is that he really has to process the things that are going on in his head to say, is this something that is valid? How am I going to word this to Alexia so that she doesn't get defensive? Because even as therapists are not perfect, right?
Yeah.
Even when we specialize in it. And I have a way that I know if he's going to address me, I grew up with a very British mother that spoke like this all of the time. Everything was very low. Oh. And she was a disciplinarian. And when voices are high, if somebody's yelling, it takes me totally off. That is a trigger for me. I don't like yelling. I think that you can say everything that you want to say without raising your voice. So I'm giving these examples because it is important for us to know what the other person's trigger is and how to bring an issue to them so that it doesn't go into this huge conflict. and that they feel they can allow themselves to feel vulnerable enough to tell you if something is bothering them, because it's important. We want to be able to avoid conflict, in a healthy way, by saying we're going to fix it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So resolution is key.
How do you, let's talk about setting boundaries a little
Mm-hmm.
bit. How are you establishing your personal boundaries, and how are you like implementing these in your life? Like,
So,
I think I feel like I know how to set a boundary, but do I really know?
Mhm.
I don't know.
So, boundaries, that's a really great topic, because I think that people use but do you really have a boundary? Because boundaries come in several different stages. It's identifying what your boundary is and knowing where that line stands. And also knowing if somebody crosses that boundary, how am I going to address it? Right? And people forget about that other part of it, saying, how am I going to address it? So, it's really important to look at that, and to know if somebody continues to go over that boundaries. Again, because this comes in stages. If somebody crosses a boundary once, you may say, listen, I'm just going to tell them. Twice, okay, I might tell them, but a little harsher. And the third time, depending on whatever that line is, that to be able to say, okay, what am I going to do? Do I stay around this person? Do I block them? Are you going to keep being around somebody that cannot respect your boundary space? And recognizing too, what does it do to you every time they do that? So that you can know that when you're in a like situation, how you might respond to it.
What if you're it does. What if you're establishing a boundary it's not like you have, like a beef with somebody, but you just are like, I'm not sure about this person, their energy. Like, I just kind of don't really want them in my sphere. So you're kind of like setting a boundary, and that person doesn't really know that you're setting a boundary because you haven't had a conversation about it. There's not really like a problem per se.
Mm-hmm.
How do you,
But
I don't know.
you just feel that energy that you just don't want to be around. And
I just feel off. Yeah.
It's, so this is an internal boundary.
Okay.
And people have to understand that is okay. There's sometimes that for whatever reason, I'm like, my spirit doesn't take that person. I'm just like, I don't know what it is about that person, but it's just, I can be polite because that's who I am. But I would not choose to entertain this person because for some reason their energy just doesn't match mine.
Yes, that is exactly what I'm talking about. Yeah.
So I think that people have to understand that for themselves, it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
You're not me. I used to teach my kids, everybody is not going to be your friend, right? And everybody, listen, sometimes you don't like people, sometimes people don't like you. And the thing is, that's okay. That's how we choose in our life who belongs in our circle, in our inner circle, and not. And sometimes it may be, I think a lot of times it is valid when we feel these different energies, but just knowing that how we respectfully go to the other side. You don't have to tell somebody or be rude that, I don't like you. And this is, I don't know why, but I just don't like your energy. Just don't be around them. And, and understand that within yourself, it's okay. We're harder on ourselves when we try to set boundaries. And oftentimes, whether it's an internal boundary or an external boundary that we're setting because somebody is physically or verbally crossing over, we feel guilty.
Mm-hmm.
But if we are secure in what that line is, that boundary line is, and we know, I just don't feel comfortable with someone crossing that,
mm-hmm.
then guess what? We have to accept that is an okay thing. We have the right to feel like we're in a safe and healthy space.
Yeah. I'll be honest with you. I'm like an empath, and I do, even though maybe the person doesn't realize, I want to be kind, but I also am like, this energy is not matching with mine. Right. But I feel bad. It's like an internal conflict that
Mm-hmm.
I have. And maybe it's because I think I'm newer to creating these boundaries for myself. I think I've had to work a long way to get to that point where I could be, honest with myself that I want to set this boundary with this person's situation, whatever.
And I think that, in times like that, we have to ask ourselves why, what is it about somebody that bothers us? And sometimes we don't know, we don't really let it click us why, but sometimes there is a trigger within there that something about this person may remind you of a negative time or something that they did that, again, we're excusing because we're nice people. They haven't done it to us, but we've seen something about them or felt something about them that it is a trigger because it reminds us of something else. This is our mind telling us, guess what? The fight or flight, and sometimes fight or flight is good. This is not an area that we want to be around. So we don't need to feel guilty for that. We need to actually own it. And feel okay about it.
Yeah.
Own it.
Just own it.
You got friends, girl. You don't need a million others. You got friends.
Right? I am trying to own this now, It taken me a lot of years to do it, but, so talking about, different types of people, I'm interested in kind of diving into the victim mentality. I feel like I'm encountering this, have encountered it, am encountering it. People that just really want to play the victim. I think we can all relate to an element of that where, you're like, this happened to me or whatever. But what are you doing when someone is constantly playing the victim in a situation? Or you just see this as like a trend in their life?
And you know what? And it is. Many people get into the victim mentality trap to where everything in life it always happens to them if it's bad, and I believe in like, if you own that mentality, then you are that mentality. And that brings with you a certain type of energy. And it's important to say, okay, let's look at why do you feel this way? There is element that remains in every situation. And that element, regardless of who else is in it, is you. So we can choose to stay in this victim mentality, or we can take our power back and we can figure out how I can find the strength to get out of it. And it is not an easy journey, but it's a necessary journey that anybody that's encountered this has to go through so that they can take their life back. Because if you're sitting in that victim mentality, you're not happy. It's just easier to blame other people, someone else, your mom, your boyfriend, your this, your that. Even if it's something as terrible as being abused, it's easier to say, okay, this happened to me and this is why I'm this way. Let me tell you, it has affected you. I own that. You should own that. It has affected you negatively. It has made you look at certain situations differently. But are you going to give that person, that situation, the ultimate power over controlling the rest of your life, or do you want to take it back? And then taking the steps, seeing the steps of little baby steps of things that you can do in order to get there.
How can you get there?
Well,
taking their power back from being a victim?
I think that number one, like I said, you got to own it. You got to, and you have to say, okay, how has this negatively affected my life? Because there's certain times that even these negative things, like holding on to the victim mentality, there's negative effects, but there's a positive aspect for you that you feel that you get out of that, whether it's sympathy, whether it's whatever else. So we have to be able to recognize those things. What are the things? Why are you staying there? How do you think that you can get out of this situation? So if it is a situation whereas, you've been a victim of domestic abuse, terrible situation, you feel as though you've had, and this person's put you in such a financial whatever bind. Let's pick the areas. What are the stressors that are within that area that you're dealing with? If you were in control, how could you take yourself back out? If it's financial, let's start looking at your finances, which is scary within itself, right? And it's a stressor within itself. But let's look at that and say, how are you going to get yourself back? If it is something to where it's trust, what are the things about trust that are affecting you? How was your trust affected? And really dissecting that and say, how can you learn to trust the right person and decipher if somebody's energy is so bad or if there's things about them that you really shouldn't? Because, you use the word empath. And I think a lot of people have empathic traits. And what they do is they pick up like strays. They want to heal the world, And what happens is that we have to recognize that even though we want to heal the world, I'm one of them. I want to really positively impact people. But I also have to recognize if I'm in a place in my life that I need to step back a little bit and really partialize whatever issues I have or whatever issues they may have so that I can deal with everything else. Our cup can only go so full.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Mm-hmm. All right. Victim mentality.
Take that mess and throw it someplace else.
Yeah. Take your power back on that for sure. I love that you are a trailblazer, advocating for women's empowerment. And how do we break down the emotional barriers that are holding us back? Where do you see we're going wrong when you're feeling stuck? You're feeling like you can't make that next step. Like, what is it that we need to release?
Well, there's a couple different traits that come along with that, and that's avoidance, anxiety, codependence. Looking at the different traits or the different emotional traits that we may have that are keeping us held back, and it's separating the behavior from the emotions. Right. And saying, okay, well, here's how I feel, here's how I feel about because I'm codependent or because I have these things that are keeping me. So why am I there? And taking your power back in the same motion by saying, if I'm there, guess what? I got to break this. Everybody's an individual. So when I give therapy with people, I really deal with them on an individual basis of saying, for you, not for everybody else. There's certain things that are commonalities, but for you, why is this affecting you in the way that it is? Why do you feel as though you're stuck in this area? Where would you like to see yourself? So that is A and Z at the end. So we got to fill in B all the way to Y. We got to figure out the different steps between that we have to take in order to win back our life and become unstuck.
When you're speaking to different groups, Christ Fellowship, these different, what are you instilling in those crowds?
Hope. I believe that this world in many realms has lost hope in so much. And, what happens is that we get downtrodden, whether it's in our workplace and even people that are coming to church because they're looking for something, in schools, I go to a lot as well, too. It is so important that we recognize the value within ourselves because everything, as I've said, everything has affected us. And we've had our good experiences and we have negative experience. And we could have a million good experiences and one bad experience comes and it will break us to the core.
Yeah.
And we have to figure out how to focus in on who exactly we are and make ourselves not be defined by everybody else, what they've said, what they've done. If we can have a vision for how we want our life to look, then you have to be willing. And that's a big word, willing, to take the steps to get there. Because I think most of us are capable, but it's the willingness to really take the steps because it is easy to live in that victim mentality and stay right, and stay there. I've had things happen in my life and I don't use my life as like a basis for anything. Grew up in a magnificent home with great parents and everything else. And guess what? I had a bad relationship. I got divorced. I feel like I was living with a narcissist, his picture should be right there. These things happen.
Yeah.
And many times what happens is that we feel as though because an incident happened or even a series of incidents that it defines our life, and it does not. But you have to allow yourself to grieve the situation. And you can't jump out of it thinking that another situation is going to cure it. You have to figure out, what is it, not just about them, but what is about me that allowed myself to become in this situation? How am I going to keep myself from getting in that situation again? How am I going to recognize the good versus evil, right? And really get myself to a place of happiness and peace in my life, because that's something that I believe everybody wants to attain. However, it's easier to stay stuck than it is to actually do the work to get where you need to be.
Yeah. Do you feel like, there's hope in every situation, right? I mean, even the worst thing, there is some hope. There's some hope to rise above that, right?
It's easy to say when you're not in the situation. And I'll give you an example, and this is personal example of my own life. Is I know that I got married young. I did. I was 23 when I got well. And that for a lot of people, that's not young, but for me, it was young. My daughter's like, oh my gosh, So I was young when I got married and probably just shouldn't have. I probably wasn't ready, but I was excited and he was hot and he had a British accent. And I said, ooh, let's do this, right? Exactly, let's do this. And and I knew it wasn't working. And I knew it wasn't working from the beginning. I was embarrassed and I didn't want to tell my family because I was like, okay, then am I going to be pointed as a failure? Because mentally, even though everybody else gets divorced, more than 50% of this population, for me, now I was like the only one. And when I decided to leave and really and I had a lot of great reasons for leaving, I struggled internally. I think that internal struggle of not succeeding, the internal struggle of did I do enough, the internal struggle of should I be there to be that support even though this person is not a good person, and it takes two to make a relationship work. So I had to sit back and do a lot of internal work for myself to say, what is it about me that chooses the way that I do? Because many of us, and I'm going to pick on women, many of us women, what we do is we date the same person with a different face. So it's the same characteristics, the same whatever. He's hot, he's fun, he's this, he's that. But I too didn't really recognize my worth and what was going to keep me happy on a long time basis and somebody that I could give to on a long time basis and be happy doing that. Because marriage should be, it was intended to be forever. It is a commitment, but how could I put myself in that situation? Fast forward to divorce. And when I did divorce, I went through hell, holy water, lost a lot of money. And I had to say to myself, I remember one day just saying, you know what, we can replace money, but I can't replace my sanity. It's like, it's so hard for it to come back. Money's a lot easier to replace. And really being able to reconcile within yourself, what is going to be okay for you? If I take these steps, what am I going to do in order to restore myself? I know that I have skills. Right? I can be able to do this. I know that I have passion. I can do this. I know that I have a child. And with children, they're a game changer. When you got kids, all of a sudden you start seeing life as it should be, right? And you want things that are better because it's not just about you anymore. It's about them, So being able to look at things in that whole and saying, I have to take certain steps in order to do it. So I don't just preach these things. I live them because it's being emotionally healthy and setting down boundaries and, avoiding codependent behavior and even depression or whatever else you might be going through. These things are, the feelings are feelings that I think everybody has. They're universal to some degree, but being able to overcome them, you have to really know for yourself, how am I? What is it that I need to do in order to step out of it to get to the other side that I can't, it may be far, but the other side I can see, and I'm not going to let anybody else get in my way. I have to be able to, a part of my boundary has to be, here's where I want to go in my life, whether it's a relationship. I want to find somebody that is going to be a great person to me, a great parent, a great whatever else. It's going to treat me well. How do you decipher that? When you're dating and when you start to see these negative traits, leave. You start to leave, have a discussion about it. But when you start to see some traits that are they're not conducive, they don't go along or mesh well with who you are, you don't have to fix them. They got to fix them. It's okay to say, when you're ready, come back. And maybe if I'm in a place and you can come back. But it is sexy, ladies and gentlemen, it is sexy when a person knows what they want and what they're worth. And when you start to dilute that, it dilutes who you are, and we start to forget who we are, and it's time to reclaim that back and to really find out who you are and make people respect that. And when people know that you have these boundaries set and you abide by them, trust, it's a game changer.
That's amazing. Like what you just said, I just got all fired up about that. I love that. Now, when you said your ex was a narcissist, so I know you talk a lot about how to spot a narcissist. Does a narcissist can you make a relationship with a narcissist work? Or is it always like when you see those traits, you need to run? It's something I never really thought about, that like,
it's a question that actually does come up. So it's a very good question.
Okay.
So, the easy answer would be no.
Okay.
An easy answer would be, well, just even looking at a narcissist is going to love bomb you in the beginning. You're going to be the most important person in their eyes in the beginning. But the reality is that with a true narcissist, they only care about themselves. Everything revolves around them. You and everybody else is an extension of them. And everybody else is really crap. They don't even light a candle. So we have to be able to look at behaviors. Now, if selfish behaviors fall within your things of what you want in a relationship, go for it. But it's very hard because a true narcissist, they cannot commit to loving you in a way that most people need to be loved, even at a minimum value. And so it's, narcissism is a word that it's like a buzzword that people use. Many of us, I think everybody has narcissistic traits to some degree, but everyone's not a narcissist. When you have a diagnosis of like narcissism, trust me, run fast.
There you go. There you go, ladies and men, right? Are typically narcissists, I hate to say it, men? Or
I think that it has been more recognized in men. It's not to say that women are not narcissists at all, because there are narcissistic women. To give you statistics, I can't, but I think that I can't remember. I wish I had looked up the numbers because I am kind of nerdy like that.
Yeah.
I am nerdy for numbers, but it's there is a greater propensity that have been recognized in men. But what we have to look at statistics is that statistics are what we make them. So if we're evaluating more men, then we're going to see it more in men. If we're evaluating more women, then that's the way how it goes. It's in looking at those different traits that are there, because even empathy is not something that a true narcissist has a capability of even having. So it's looking at, again, not the potential of somebody, but looking at the truth of who somebody is, of when you're dating and you're seeing certain traits that they came on so strong. Listen, they were buying you things, telling you how they loved you by the second weekend or second date, and looking at all these things. And then all of it, when it shuts off hard. And many people that date a narcissist are constantly chasing the feelings that they got in the beginning of that relationship. And you won't attain it because honestly, they win and they actually get off by seeing you upset. So it's this circle of like, okay, this narcissist is going to go and they're going to bait you into arguing and proving you wrong and gaslighting you and all of these different things. And as soon as they get what they want, they're like, okay, they're okay. Yeah, it's like a game. And even, when prepare yourself, because in leaving a narcissist, that is a whole journey within itself, because how could he or she leave me? I'm like the best. I'm like the best it can be. Get prepared, because they're going to talk about you and tell people how crazy you are. But I'm going to tell you this, you're not crazy. Get out while you can, because it's going to be, the longer you wait is the worse off it will be. And then when they hop off, listen, they're just hopping off to find the next victim to their narcissism.
I feel like I've seen this play out with friends and partners, that they've been dating. Oh gosh. Yeah. I think it can get super messy, right? Oh,
100%.
I want to talk about social media a little bit and how, you think the effects of social media on our mental health. What is it doing to us as a society?
So I think that social media is this amazing platform that we can use for so many different things. Many people use it to show the best parts of their life. And sometimes you'll see people that show the worst parts of their life. But I think that it can give a false sense of reality if we don't really understand and really target in what we're listening to or what we're watching on social media. We have to be able to know that everything that we see on social media, when you're seeing all of these people, they're on these amazing vacations and stuff like that all the time, what we do is we compare. We compare ourselves to them. And usually it's not comparing in a positive way. It's comparing saying, I wish that I had that. I wish that I could be that. And you have to be careful of falling into that trap, that social media trap, because social media is entertainment. And I think that it should be used as entertainment, and even it can be educational. I love podcasts like this where we can jump on and really learn something, but really knowing what your feed has on it, and knowing even your own mental health. For myself, please, I love to watch like happy stuff and funny stuff because I'm dealing with heavy stuff all day long. So sometimes for me, it's nice. I love to watch little cooking things on there or whatever it is, but things that can really feed into the positive aspect of my life rather than to bring me down. So it's just being very aware for kids and for adults, because we speak a lot about, adolescents or teenagers. But let me tell you something, for adults, it's the same thing, and we have to be able to monitor what we're feeding our brain and our mental health.
Yes. Sometimes I'm like, did this lift me up? Just take I just take a scan of I just scrolled mindlessly for a little while. And did this lift me up, or did this leave me feeling really empty or sad or angry or whatever emotion?
100%. It's weirdly enough, even on certain things, like when we look at like news or certain TV, you have to know. I stopped watching I hate to say that because I would like to think that I'm aware, right? But certain things like with the news, I don't watch. Why? Because it's not good news. And I think that, in media in general, not just in social media, we have to be so careful of what we're taking in and if it is affecting our day. Now, you want to be aware. So what I do is I might have a couple minutes. And honestly, all the bad news just reels over all day long. So you can do a recap, do if you need to know, then you do like a recap so you can find out for conversational topics. But trust me, it is not, you have to know what you can take and set that boundary as well too in your mental health, a mental health boundary of what is feeding me positively and what's not.
Yes.
So do an evaluation.
Honest to God, I have not watched a news program since 2020. And I said, you know what? If there's something major, someone will tell me. My husband will probably tell me. Someone will tell me. I will find out if I need to know it. Right?
100%.
And my mom is like, what? She's like, oh, I saw and I'm like, that's your first problem. You're watching the news. And I used to work at a television station, so it's like, but I don't do it anymore. I don't do it anymore. Not good for me.
Yeah. It's smart.
Yeah. So Alexia, since this is a cinnamon effect, and I use cinnamon in the title of my podcast as like a metaphor for life, what makes life sweeter, healthier, more fulfilling, I want to know what your cinnamon effect is. What makes your life better?
You know what? This sounds so corny, but being able to feed into and impact positively people's lives, and knowing that I do it on a daily basis. And I really do believe that I am in a profession that I was intended to do. So it is, because it doesn't even seem like a job, and it's nice that I get paid for it, but it's, it's awesome that when I know that I can positively impact other people. So that is definitely my cinnamon effect on a daily basis. I say like my little mantra in the morning, and it is just, let me be allowed to speak positively, and for somebody to get something out of our conversation, to where they can restore their life and find themselves again. So
I love that.
I think, yeah.
I love that. Thank you so much. I want to know, please tell everybody where they can find you.
Well, you can find me. I'm a lot on social media, the good ones, the good social media, right? You can find me on Instagram, on TikTok, Alexia.McLeod. That's McLeod. Or you can just give me a call, 561-835-5787. And I look forward to hearing from all of you guys and helping us break these unhealthy boundaries.
Yes. Oh, Alexia, you were so fantastic. You have the best smile. Because we're just seeing each other for the first time, but she does have a really excellent Instagram page where you put a lot of great information on there. So I always love watching that. And I'm so happy to connect with you. And I feel like we just kind of tipped the iceberg. Like maybe we should do this again.
Listen, hit me up. I'm here. Okay. So I love that type of stuff.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Thank you so much.
It was a pleasure. Take care.
Okay. Bye-bye. Thanks for
Bye.
listening to The Cinnamon Effect. If you like this episode, please rate, review, and share it with someone you love. See you next time.